Welcome, everyone. My name is Phyllis Wang, and I am chair of the Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York. Thank you to Rob Kovac and the Jewish Federation for arranging this event and for everything they do to help strengthen our Jewish community and support people of all ages to ensure they live dignified lives. It is my pleasure today to introduce my friend and community activist, Josie Kibbert. Josie is a longstanding member of Jewish Federation and is currently a member of the Federation's Israel and World Affairs Committee. She's a member of the Honorary Council of the Hadassah National Assembly and is an area vice president of the board of Hadassah Northern New England. Back in the 80s and 90s, Josie and her late husband's family were very active in the national movement to free Soviet Jewry, as well as locally with resettlement of those families coming to the Capital District. In the late 70s, before the two local Albany and Schenectady federations merged, the first wave of refugees from the former Soviet Union began to be resettled in Schenectady. During that time, Josie co-chaired the resettlement for the Schenectady Federation with the late Frida Rosner. When the next wave of refugees came between 89 and 1991, Josie worked for Jewish Family Services in Albany as co-director of resettlement, again with Frida Rosner. And with that, let me introduce Josie Kibbert.
Thank you so much, Phyllis, for that lovely introduction and bringing me back to those days when I was doing all of that resettlement work. I also want to reiterate a thank you to the staff and to Rob Kovac, our CEO and president of our Federation of Northeastern New York. Shalom and welcome to all of you. I'm so excited to see so many on today's program. We're going back in time to the 1980s for a 1-hour program entitled Let My People Go, a local success story. There will be time for Q&A during the last 10 to 15 minutes of the program, but please put your questions in the chat as you think of them during the hour. The program is being recorded and it's also live on Facebook, and it will be available to all of you after the program. Please remain muted during the main part of the program, and then you can unmute yourself when the question and answer period comes. We're privileged today to hear about the struggle of one Refusnik family, David and Naina Kvartin, and their children, who during the late 1970s and through much of the 1980s were refused multiple times for exit visas to Israel. Their struggle touched the hearts of the then Schenectady Jewish Communities Federation. And with our active support, it led to a very successful conclusion, their aliyah to Israel. We'll hear their special story shortly, but first let's briefly recall what an extraordinary period of the 1980s, of what that period of time was, when we were a totally united Jewish community in the United States in the struggle to free Soviet Jewry. We wrote letters, we wore bracelets such as this. I still have mine for Anatoly Sharansky. We added special prayers at our Seder tables. We twinned our bar and bat mitzvah children, made phone calls, and raised funds. At the same time, the political climate in the United States was perfect for our effort. The Soviet Union was our enemy. All of Congress was with us in our efforts. Senators and congressmen marched with us and protested with us. Under the banner of Let My People Go, our community participated in protests and marches in New York City, in downtown Albany in the well of the Legislative Office Building, and a large group of us flew to Washington, D.C. to take part in that famous march on the mall to free Soviet Jewry, and that was in December of 1987. This photo, Ilana, if you could put up that first photo, shows us that it was the occasion of our large new banner indicating that our two federations from Schenectady and Albany had merged by then into the United Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York. That decade of the 80s was truly the perfect time to fight our fight. While those protests, thank you for the photo. While those protest activities were ongoing, our Capital District was busy welcoming and resettling families who were sent to our area by HIAS in two separate waves. The first one was in the late 1970s to 1981, and then again from 89 to 91. In between, the Iron Gate fell again. During those two periods, our greater community resettled a total of around 500 families. But how did we find out about the Kvarton family? Well, one of the families that was resettled in Schenectady were Boris and Maya Golgoff and their two sons. Boris is with us online today. Later, and it's a long story, which I won't go into, but Maya came with their sons in 1981. Then Boris followed after a longer struggle to receive his exit visa, and he came to join his family in December of 1982. Believe it or not, Congregation Agudat Achim in Schenectady planned a beautiful wedding ceremony under the chuppah with their sons standing aside of them. And believe it or not, Boris arrived in time for that wedding to take place right on their 25th wedding anniversary. The Associated Press was there and the story was published nationally. Please show those next two photos of the joyous occasion. There they are under the chuppah and having a first toast. It was a joyous occasion indeed. Soon after that, Boris began to speak of his young cousins in Moscow, David and Naina Kvarton and their children, who were refused exit visas to Israel repeatedly. Their story immediately caught our attention, and the Schenectady Federation, Hadassah, and the synagogues there took up the fight to free the Kvarton family through letter writing, phone calls, even a visit to Moscow by a mother and her teenage daughter from Temple Gates of Heaven. And they went to Moscow to meet David in the subway station. Then, late one evening in July of 1986, with the Golgoffs, Shelley Shapiro, and a Times Union journalist present in my home in Schenectady, we made a phone call to speak to Ina Kvarton in Moscow. It was a very dangerous move for her, but it seemed to do the trick. And I think you'll hear more about that later. And they finally were permitted to leave for Israel in April of 1987. Actually, my husband and I visited David and Naina in Jerusalem in 1989, and again in 1992, when we were there with the first family to resettle in Schenectady back in July of 1976. Nellie and Wally Spiegel were going on their first trip to Israel, and Stan and I joined them. This was the photo in 1989. Stan and I were there for Jewish agency meetings, and there's Ina and David Kvarton with a former director of the Schenectady Federation. And the next one. And there we are. I think Wally must have been taking the photo, but there's Nellie in the picture with David and Ina Kvarton and my late husband, Stanley. And Nellie is with us online today. I'm very pleased to say that. Not long after 1992, we lost Our community lost direct contact with the Kvarton family, but we heard updates all the time from the Goldgoffs. Now flash forward about 35 years. Imagine our surprise when out of the blue, back in September, Rob Kovac, our director, our CEO, received an email from a colleague working for the Jewish Agency here in the United States to tell him that Ilana Kvarton, one of the 4 Kvarton children, now an adult married woman, wanted to connect with anyone who had helped her family back in the 1980s in Schenectady, New York. Imagine. The story of their struggle and success is the story of today's event. It's now my honor to introduce Dr. Ilana Kvarton, speaking today from her current home in Los Angeles, where she is in her 3rd year of working for the Jewish Agency as the regional director for the western part of the United States, overseeing Aliyah, Shlichim, partnerships, and strategy. Born in the former Soviet Union, she made Aliyah to Israel with her parents and 3 siblings, as I said, in April 1987. Ilana grew up in Jerusalem and served as a commander in the IDF and an officer in the Field Intelligence Unit, including service, imagine, deep into the Gaza Strip. She earned her BA in Law and Psychology from Hebrew University, her master's degree in conflict resolution from Ben-Gurion University, and her PhD in gender studies from Bar-Ilan University. Based on her PhD research, she has written and published a book called Imprisoned: Women in Extreme Controlling Relationships. I've left out much more of her bio, but I certainly want to share that Ilana is married to BG, a tour guide and educator, and they have 4 children, Tamara, Yoav, Ivri, and Arava. And when they go back to Israel this August, they live in a newly established community called Eliav. You'll hear about that in a moment. So welcome, Ilana, and thank you for reaching out to our Federation for this extraordinary opportunity. Let me start off with a first question to you. What prompted you to reach out to our Federation at this point in your life? And did you only recently hear about the help that your family received from the Schenectady Jewish community back in the day? Let's hear your story.
Good morning. Everyone, and thank you, Josie. And I hope to actually see you in person. These like Zoom events, you know, I really want to come and hug you and show how grateful I am and we are. I'm still embarrassed every time someone reads my bio and introduction, but that's how it is in America, so I have to get used to it after all these years. But thank you for the intro, and thank you for this event. And thank you everyone on the call and not on the call for all of your efforts to help us start our journey in Israel and make Aliyah and really be the beginning of my family's story, if you will. And there's many people on the Zoom that I want to thank and say hi, but specifically, I want my parents to raise their hands, David and Ina Kvarton, who are sitting right now in their house in Jerusalem and have joined us this evening. And also, I want to introduce Boris Goldgoff, who's also on the line with us, sitting in his house in Tampa and saying hi as well. And I'm sure a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about, they have corrections or better details, because the way I tell my story, you know, is the way I remember it or the way I feel it. So it's obviously different. So why did I reach out? You know, I often ask myself, you know, why do people help other people? You know, or what is kind of like the circular connection between us all around the world? And you know, I grew up in a very Zionistic home. I mean, you can imagine in the 80s in Moscow, where I was born, I was growing up with these parents that you hear about who did this whole struggle for the Jewish community in Moscow and for themselves and for the world to know really what's happening in Russia, because people, you know, didn't know. And so growing up in that home, you know, hearing Hebrew and hearing stories about Israel and really kind of like living our lives, hoping to get to Israel is really how I grew up. You know, it's who I am. It's my journey. So I always have known that that's how we started our lives. So there was, you know, an almost a decade of struggle to get to Israel. And specifically, you know, on the job here, I oversee Aliyah, and we'll talk about it kind of later today about my work. But 6 months ago, I think I was submitting my parents' story to receive kind of like a heroic recognition in Israel. And as I was doing it, I asked my sister Rina, who's also on the line, to locate all of the old documents, you know, from back then. And she took it all out, and we started reading all the names that came up from the Schenectady Federation that adopted us. And I decided to find you all. You know, I decided to see who are those people that, you know, I'm 40 now. I was 6 at the time. So like what happened 34 years ago, and you know, and here I am today. So I reached out and to say that, you know, your work matters. I don't know if you know, but you volunteer in committees, right? Or you went on that march, or you wore the bracelets, or you heard news, you know, from Russia, or you're hearing today about, I guess, Jews around the world. But, you know, why do you care? Who are these people? You don't know them. These are strangers, right? So like you go out of your way to help. You raise funds, you make all of this kind of like a struggle and this project, this operation. I think you rarely see the results of your work, the results of your volunteering, because you do it from the heart. You do it because you want to, you do it because of Tikkun Olam, you do it because we're all a Jewish collective. And I think this opportunity to kind of like reconnect, to connect the dots, our opportunity to thank you for doing this and tell you you succeeded, you know, that what a gift it was for us. I think it's super important. I think we all, when we have the opportunity to kind of like to close the circle with the people who benefited us, it's something we really have to do. It's our obligation.
That's so meaningful, Alana. Thank you. Please tell us about your family's journey in whatever way you wish to inform us.
Okay, I will. And like I said, because there's so many people on the call who know more details or have kind of like a more crystal memory, my memory is very broken. It's pieces of stories. When my parents turned 70 a few years ago, Rina, my sister, and me, we sat them down and we took videos of interviews of them, and we asked them, it's another story and another story. And my parents, being who they are, they don't think they're heroes. They think they're just people who are trying to, you know, find a better life for their kids. That's all they think they are. And so these kind of like fractions of stories are coming together slowly, and more details are coming. Even, you know, Josie, you and me, when we're having conversations, kind of like preparing for today, more things came up that we learned about, more names, more details, and things like that. So so really, you know, I've memories of growing up in the home where they were learning Hebrew, and they were hearing about news from Israel, receiving things and information, and everything was very dangerous. Everything was very secret. You know, Russia is a country where you can't just make a phone call and you can't just send a letter. It's not a direct communication. So to bring news outside, you had to be very creative. And my mom, from whom I take this kind of like, you know, fiercefulness and I guess my smile, she was a very positive person. She always had hope that we'll end up coming to Israel. And, you know, she was my age with the same, you know, 40 with 4 kids. Imagine her, you know, going at 6 a.m., picking up the phone and calling, I think from the post office, calling you and reading you a letter that she wants to send to all of the powerful women that she thinks could help her, you know, Nancy Reagan and Gorbachev's wife and Queen of England and Queen of Holland, to say, you're a mother, I'm a mother, you know, understand me. I want to rescue my family. I want to go to the Jewish state. That's where I want to raise my children. You know, I can't imagine myself doing that, but that's what she did, yes. Right? And on that call, you heard the letter being read. You then made those letters and you had them sent, you know, through senators or through other people for them to reach where they needed to reach. And, you know, this was in the 80s, but that was really one of the things that made awareness in the Western world for what was going on. I mean, people are being held in a country. They can't leave because they can't receive an exit visa. I mean, today, 2022, who would have thought? Today, we need a visa to enter, right? I needed a visa to enter the US. But then you couldn't leave unless you had an exit visa. What kind of, captured in a state you don't want to be in. So really, after all of your efforts and after all of these struggles, in a rescue operation by the Jewish Agency, we made Aliyah through Vienna. Again, you couldn't go directly. We actually made Aliyah with more family members, with my grandma Tamara, and with my mom's brother Michael and his wife Lilia, and their daughters Masha and Dina. So it was really the 11 of us. We came to Jerusalem, and so I was 6. My older sister Hannah was 14. My brother Shmuel was 4, and my sister Rina was 2. So, and my parents are in the 40s, starting a new life in Israel, learning a new language. This is 1987, learning a new language, looking for a job, looking for a place to live. And we started our lives in Jerusalem. And just the context, right? The big Aliyah from Russia to Israel was in the 90s. So this was a few years before the state was really receiving kind of like 1 million olim. So I think on one hand, it was hard for us, to come into a country as olim. But on the other hand, we had to quickly kind of like toughen it up, and get absorbed very quickly because there wasn't a big wave. There wasn't kind of like that big happening.
Well, and then how was the absorption for you then? How did your parents find work, etc.? Can you tell us a little bit about that early period?
Yeah, I think at first it was very hard. I think my father was looking for work. My mom was being with us, taking care, of finding daycare or finding kind of like the day-to-day life, the struggle. We had some relatives in Jerusalem, so we had some help, some connection, and I think it's that thankfulness that they felt. We finally, after a decade, made the journey to Israel, and the atmosphere at home was very. We're thankful for the medical system. We're thankful for the education system. We're thankful for this government, because everything is better than Russia. But in any case, this is the Jewish state. This is where we want to be. This is what we love. This is what we feel thankful for. So everything was in a very positive state. So both of my parents, they found jobs that they did. My dad still worked there, but my mom retired from there. So we're talking about, 30 years of career in the same place, which is rare, especially for someone coming kind of like with different degrees and without, and not being a native Israeli. So I grew up in Jerusalem. We all went, to schools. We all quickly learned Hebrew. We also learned English because we had American neighbors. And I think we're good at languages, so I guess we kind of knew all these 3 languages happening. I don't remember feeling like I'm struggling or like it's difficult to be absorbed, because like I said, we weren't one of a wave of million people. It was just us. So, going to school, making friends, kind of like getting accustomed to the country. So that's for me. I think my siblings had, different experiences, but that's.
So take us forward a little bit. Can you, if it's the right moment for you to tell us what your siblings are doing currently?
Yeah, I want to.
Or was there some more photos that you wanted to show first?
Yeah, I want to quickly show. Okay, I don't know if you can see. But this is, these are kind of like the newspaper articles that we were locating through that period. So this is an article talking about Schenectady Federation adopting the refusnik family and talking about how you can communicate. And it says that you need to call Josie to find a way to communicate and to send letters.
And that was before Rina was born, is that correct?
Right,
that photo,
right. Yeah. The pictures, yeah, it's just
your
my
youngest sister, yes.
Yes,
okay.
The 4th child was not even born yet, right? So, and then here it kind of talks about also, the efforts of the community, and about collecting funds, for the struggle in the community. And I think this one talks about the phone call that you were doing, and the one where my mother was reading the letter that she wanted to send out, and that you all took care of. You know, her letter, it says here, I think her letter starts, you know, "Dear Madame, my family needs your help. I've been living in Moscow all my life, but being Jewish, I dream of being in the promised land. Now it is more than 7 years since my family has applied for a visa. We have applied to all of the state's offices, you know, and so on." And then it says that the phone call was cut off. And that you were waiting on the line because you didn't know, but you were shouting into the phone that you have press here, which is what you were told to do in order for whoever is tapping the call and listening, they would hear that there's press and there's not, and they can't do something, right?
Exactly.
And
The article, excuse me, said a couple of minutes. It was more like 20 minutes. We were hanging on and really yelling into the phone that they had
I can't imagine, you know, and it's
together.
nighttime and you don't know what's going on and you don't know if my mom is there or not, right?
Exactly. And it was late at night for us. And I guess it was morning for
like,
your mom.
yeah, it was like 6 a.m. for her.
Yes.
You know, and this is from Agudat Achim, talks about us coming to Israel, and that if you want to connect or if you want to visit them in Jerusalem, you know, this is already in 1987.
Yes.
This is us. So it's my parents and the four of us. It's a very blurry picture. We have, you know, black and white pictures from Russia, and this is you know, a colorful one. So this is us when we made Aliyah. And yeah, so I can talk about my siblings. So this is the four of us. This is a few years back. So we kind of look like this. So Hannah is the oldest. She lives in London. She's a professor for computer science in King's College. So she lives with her husband Grisha and their 3 children, Nomi, Michael, and Daniel. And my brother Shmuel, he's a surgeon. He's a doctor, plastics. In Israel, and he lives with his wife Ella and his son Jonathan. And my sister Rina here, she's an actress and a producer and a creator, and she lives also in Jerusalem with her husband Dror and their 3 kids, Galia, Berry, and Talma. So that's the 4 of us here. You know, we grew up. This is 34 years later, so that's where we're at today.
Wow. Oh, there was that one more picture with all of the grandchildren. Are you saving that?
Yeah, I'll show it in a minute. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Yeah. So I understand that you and your family decided to move out of Jerusalem further south with a number of families to start a new life in a new community that you built from scratch. Could you tell us a little bit about Eliav, your community south of Jerusalem or in the desert?
Yep. So, you know, again, my journey started, you know, with your help coming to a new country and starting a new life. And I think growing up, this kind of like feeling of, you know, resettling Israel or doing the Zionistic act is something that was, you know, part of me, part of my soul. And so you know, I went to university in Jerusalem. Then we moved to Tel Aviv, and you know, when we had our first child, Tamara, who was named after my grandma, when she was just 1 year old, we thought, you know what, we want to move to a community. We want to live with people we know. We want to help do something that is you know, starting something new or shaping our future. And we heard about this community being founded called Eliav in the south. It's between Kiryat Gat and Be'er Sheva. It was really the middle of nowhere. And in 2009, we moved into a mobile home. It's like a caravan, a trailer, if you will. So imagine a street with 40 trailers of people, of families, of young families in their 20s, you know, with a child or 2, living in the middle of nowhere and creating this community. And this is a community of secular and Orthodox living together, which is unusual for Israel. We don't really mix. Usually Orthodox communities are very much separate. But this community was talking about tolerance, about living together, about creating a new future, about knowing who the other is, knowing the people, and having this kind of like shared future together. So that's where we started our home. Many, many years afterwards, the trailers became home because we finally were able to build homes. And that's where the community is at right now. And there are 200 families. It's a place where we did everything. We established the daycare, a school, the synagogue, the cultural life, holidays, everything. We really did it all by ourselves. Volunteering at night and going to committees and being very, very active. I just want to mention one thing that I skipped kind of like in the story is that, again, growing up kind of like with the story of Aliyah and the struggle and the Jewish agency, I always wanted to do shlichut. I wanted to be a shlicha, I wanted to be an emissary. And when I finished my army service, I went with a delegation, with a mishlachat, to a Jewish camp in the East Coast. It's called Harlem, if you know it. It's a reform camp in the Poconos. And I went there to be a camp counselor. And at that camp, it was really the first or the second time that I've met American Jewry. I didn't know about Reform and conservative Jews. I didn't know about kind of like living as a minority, sending to a school that you pay for, paying your dues to a synagogue, having anti-Semitism around you. I've heard about it, from Russia, but I didn't know about it. And so when I was a camp counselor, it was really the first time that I've met American Jewry. And at that camp, I met BG, my husband today, and we fell in love. He's American. He grew up in this camp. His father is a Reform rabbi, and he grew up there. And we met and we fell in love. And a year later, he made Aliyah also with the Jewish Agency to Israel, and that's where we started our family and everything that I described about Eliyav and our kids and everything. So
that's so interesting. I didn't know that part of it. I had meant to preface my question about Eliyav by telling you that our federation, our Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York, partners with the Eshkol region of Israel, right on the Gaza border. So it was very interesting to hear how you established your community literally in the desert.
Yeah, and I thought what was interesting when we were kind of like moving in 2009, everybody around us were saying, you guys are crazy. Why are you moving in the middle of nowhere from Tel Aviv? You're not going to survive a month. But my parents were the only ones who said, you know what, this is true Zionism. You're going to resettle the Negev. You're going in the middle of nowhere. This is what we wanted to do, but we came to Jerusalem. This is just to show you how humble and modest they are, with the journey they made compared to
yes. There was something that you've done in your community there, and when you go back, I assume you will resume it. You established an Orthodox minyan, but it was an inclusive minyan. So can you tell us, our community, about that?
Sure. So I guess it's a combination of two things. One, what I learned from American Jewry, visiting both as a camp counselor and later on with BG and visiting his family in the East Coast, kind of like seeing other ways to do Judaism. And the fact that I specialize in women's rights, my passion, my career, everything that I do is that I'm an activist for women's rights. By the way, from activism to activism, this is kind of like the atmosphere I grew up in. So this is the reason I do what I do. But the combination between the women's rights passion and the knowledge that I acquired about American Jewry led me to start this minyan, which is inclusive. So it's still Orthodox, but it's really stretching the lines of having women participate in the prayer. That means reading Torah when possible. That means doing Aliyah when possible. That means being chazaniot when possible. And in this minyan, we did our daughter's bat mitzvah. And later on, a lot of people were able to do bat mitzvah and bar mitzvah. And again, it sounds, not, like what is it for someone who's a reform or conservative? But in a community where you have half Orthodox and half secular, it's a special minyan that allows everybody to participate. So that's why it was so unique.
Wow. How far are you actually from Beersheba? I mean, where do you even grocery shop down there?
Yeah, that's an issue. There's no grocery shopping in Eliav.
Uh-huh.
40 minutes from Beersheba. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
we make do.
That's really something. So here you are in Los Angeles now. Could you tell us a little bit about why you decided to take a contract with the Jewish Agency to spend 3 years with your family in Los Angeles and
course.
leave your wonderful community in Eliav and come to the United States?
So BG and I being both Olim, right, and raising our family on the grounds of Zionism and of shlichut and of activism, we always wanted to do a shlichut and give back to the Jewish collective, and also to take part in the endeavor of Aliyah to Israel. And so a few years ago, I had the opportunity to apply for this position and start working for the Jewish Agency. And I am now the regional director of the Western region. So I'm not in the East Coast where everything happened, but I'm on the West Coast. And so we moved here 3 years ago, BG and I and our 4 children, and we live in Los Angeles. And I mean, every time I allow someone to make Aliyah, or every time I solve a complicated case here, it kind of closes the circle, with those days in the 80s where we were able to make Aliyah, although that was Aliyah of rescue, and right now I'm handling Aliyah of choice, but still the Jewish Agency is helping, other communities in distress still in 2022 to make Aliyah of rescue as well. So being part of this kind of the peoplehood and the Jewish collective and doing this work is what we always wanted to do. We really wanted to give back. We really wanted to be in the place where we could be part of this in this endeavor.
Wow. And your job, have you helped a lot of people to make Aliyah during this period of 3 years that you've been there?
So
is that one of the primary things that you've been working on?
So thousands of people make Aliyah to Israel, and over the course of the COVID crisis, even more people made Aliyah. Like the feeling of where is my home, where is my real home, really grew, and more people opened Aliyah files and made Aliyah. I think on the call there's Ellen Decker, who works on Aliyah files in the West Coast, and she's the one responsible for all of the Olim who come from here. This is hundreds of people that she handles every day. It's also her birthday, so Mazal Tov, Ellen. But yeah, we deal with it, and right now we're dealing with Aliyah from Ethiopia. We're also listening to everything that's happening in Ukraine. It's part of the job to be kind of like with your hand on the pulse of where Jews are everywhere, and to see where our help is needed. And kind of connects me to, why would you help someone you don't know? And the reason is because of this kind of like connection that we have, even though we're spread out around the world. And this is also the reason why you helped. So
it truly is remarkable to hear this story and to realize that our small community of Schenectady in those days had a great impact on your family in particular, thanks to the Golgoths, who happened by chance to come to live in Schenectady and told us about your family. I'm kind of glancing at the chats. I hope people are thinking of questions for you. There are a few there. In another moment or two, we will take questions. Rob Kovach is going to handle that for us. But just before we close this part of the program, if you wouldn't mind going back to the article that talked about the mother and teenager that went to Moscow to meet your father in the subway. You've slid by that, and I wanted you to find it if you can. I don't know which number it is. It was before you started showing the pictures of your family. There, that one. Oop. No, that one, yes. So in this article that I don't remember writing, but I did, it talks about the mother and teenager that went to Moscow to meet your father in the Moscow subway. And that was the Salwin family. They happened to live next door to us in Niskayuna. That's a suburb of Schenectady for those out of town. And Sarah Salwin, who was that teenager, is on our line with us today. So maybe a little later you can have a conversation with her I see her there, Sarah
Nice to see you.
Torgiani.
That's great.
So I wanted to make mention of that because we do, a lot of people who worked on this effort back in those early and mid and late 80s have passed away. But a few people are still around and they are on this call today. I don't know how many people actually got on, about 66 now, even though we had many more registrations. But it was a remarkable period of our lives. And that's why we should be helping other refugee populations as well. And our community is now getting the people from Afghanistan. And I
Right,
know a lot of us are
but
working
I
on
think not only your work around Aliyah, but all of your work. If I can connect it a little bit to explaining just a minute more about the Jewish Agency and the connection of you as a federation. So I think what was remarkable in in your effort back then is that everybody was united. You know, you said it. It was the federation and the synagogue and the women group and another synagogue. Like everybody was united to make this effort. And that's the only way you can do it. You know, when we're spread out, when we're separated, when we're not working together, we're not going to succeed. And I think today, federations of North America are working hard in raising funds to Israel. And for example, you know, partnering with a global partner like the Jewish Agency helps because the Jewish Agency is present, you know, in 66 countries, making sure that that these funds are helping Jews around the world. And so just to say that other than Aliyah, the Jewish Agency is responsible for connecting Jews around the world, like making sure that people know about other people, making sure that people are connected to Israel and to our global stories. You know, we have shlichim. I don't know if you know, but in North America, we have about 300 shlichim on the ground, spread out in your communities, doing community work, doing informal education in synagogues and JCCs and schools and youth groups, you know, everywhere. So this presence, this kind of like being on the ground, being next to each other is what helps everybody know what's going on and everybody help one another and create this one collective and one peoplehood. And I think it's very, very important.
Beautifully said, Ilana. I'm just trying to think if, yeah, okay. It's time really to start any questions. If you haven't already put them in the chat, please do so. If you have comments.
I'm just showing my family for a minute.
Yes, this is your current, yeah.
Yes, it's Tamara, Yoav, and Rafa, and Vigi. Yeah, it's everyone. And that's my parents. Most of the grandkids, the ones from London, are not here. But this is a picture we took with the clan. That's a growing clan. So just to show you,
it's just wonderful.
That, you know, that it ripples. The effect ripples and continues generations after generations.
Mazel tov, Ina and David. What a beautiful, beautiful family. Rob, I'd like to turn it over to our CEO at the moment. If there are some questions here, a lot of them are statements I'm reading quickly.
Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Ilana. That was fantastic. We don't have a lot of questions yet. I'm hoping people will write in, but some of the things that we've been seeing in the chat, you have fans, people who have worked with you in Seattle and in LA. So thank you to them. I did get one offline chat, a woman in our community who your father-in-law was her childhood rabbi.
Oh my.
So she's been chatting with your husband offline. Questions. Question number one from Linda asks, how do you like living in LA? Similarities with Israel? What do you miss about Israel? Sort of the living experience.
It's a great question because what I do all the time is compare. You can't not compare. I'm a Jew after all. So I very much miss my family in Israel. So this feeling of having your family surrounding you and your friends and this kind of like belonging, I think I miss that. I am enjoying the difference, the fact that I meet people who are different from me and the fact that I need to be explaining and talking about Israel and about being Jewish everywhere. That's something very challenging, but important. And I'm grateful that my kids have the opportunity to spend a few years living in a different culture and a different environment and develop resilience, I think, to those changes and moves and everything they're experiencing here. It's a huge gift that they're going to carry for life.
Okay. So this came up actually when we were working on the flyers for this program, and it almost didn't make it out of proofreading when I was asked what happened to the spelling of your last name. And so we have that question now. You started out Kvarton with a V, and now we see you use a W. When did that happen? What prompted that change?
It's a great question. I actually, as I'm searching relatives around the world and using, everything I can to find people who belong to our family. Our family last name is spelled sometimes with a Q and not with a K, sometimes with a V and not with a W. And my mom's name appears in all of your articles as Naina, which is the full name, but she's Ina. So yeah, so names are changing. We're still the Kvarton family. It's the same. In Hebrew, it's also spelled either with one vav or with two. So it's all of the above.
Okay. Can you talk about how the Orthodox and secular groups got along near Beersheba?
Got along?
Interaction, were they separate there? Were they?
In Eliab.
Oh, in Eliab.
Mhm.
In
Oh, in
Eliab.
Eliab.
So we're living together, and our kids are, playing together, eating at each other's homes, going to school together. It's very much together, but every identity is being kept to itself. Like, we're not trying to make the Orthodox secular, and they're not trying to make the secular Orthodox. It's about keeping the identities, but living together.
Nice. Question, can you talk about your children and sort of what do they know of their family history? How do they, are they identifying as Israelis in America, or have they settled into the California style? What languages do they speak? Former Soviet Union, is that part of their mindset? What's up with the kids?
Yeah. So actually, our oldest daughter, Tamara, she's almost 14, and her project over the past year is to create this family story. So she's using those articles of Schenectady Federation adopting my family, and she's telling the stories. So this is like another example of how generations keep telling the same story, and how your influence ripples through many more years than just the 34 years we're talking about today. So she's very much into that story. I try to come to their schools, to their classes, and to tell about refuseniks, because not many people know in America, not many people know in Israel about the refuseniks era. If you weren't involved, you don't know that there's such a thing. How can you be refused to leave? So I try to tell it, and my mom used to come to their schools also when they were younger and to tell that story on Yom Yerushalayim. So it's a story that's being told, and they speak English right now. They forgot Hebrew completely. We're going to fix it when we go back home. They don't know Russian. I didn't feel safe enough to speak Russian to them. We tried a little bit. My mom tried a little bit, but then we moved, quickly to Hebrew. So they really have two languages, and sometimes they'll say, Russian, Israeli, American is what they'll say. And one of our kids is in a public school. So he says, wait, I'm Jewish, I'm Russian, I'm American, I'm Israeli, like, who am I? So it's a very complex identity that I think is important to embrace and to think about, but it's, it's what makes them who they are.
It's a rich identity, though. It's on so many levels.
And certainly while your daughter's doing research, if she wants to visit, we'd love to have her. It's
a great idea. Maybe she will.
All right. Can you speak to the needs of new immigrants beyond the basics of shelter and clothing? What kind of emotional support, system navigation is most helpful? What tips can you share with us as we are looking to our own situation here in trying to be helpful?
I think it depends where you come from, which gap you're trying to close. I know that, you know, for example, in Israel, when Olim came from Ethiopia, the gap that we needed to close was that it's a Western country, so things were different for them in every aspect. It could be, it's not just a language barrier, right? It's a cultural barrier. So beyond shelter and food, there were programs teaching into the Israeli culture. So I think it's the same. So it really depends if you come in from a Western background or not. It also depends. You want to take care of the children in education and youth groups and kind of like make them familiar with the community, and you want to help the parents with job security and with language. So these are really, it's basics, but it's important. I can share that when we moved here, which it's not immigration at all, you know, we came here for a few years, but the first month, people from the community were inviting us over for play dates and for meals and for Shabbat. And that was super helpful to have a familiar face and to have someone hearing our story and our struggles and sharing it with us, to have someone you can call. So that was, I think, the main thing that helped.
Okay.
Are there any more questions in chat?
Maybe if Boris or if my parents want to add a few words since they're on the call.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Before we conclude, that would be terrific. If they would unmute.
Boris,
David.
you need to unmute. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, I want to thank the Jewish Federation and especially Josie Kiewert for helping to settle my family in Schenectady. Agudat Ahim introduced us to Jewish life, and it was our Jewish home for 20 years. We had 3 marriages, and Rabbi Kiefer is now in Israel, as Josie told me. Many thanks to him. What to tell about the Kvartsin family? It was always an exceptional family. Ina was for me a raw Jewish woman. And a few years ago, the raw Jewish woman became Ilana. I told her about this. She's exceptional in everything. Do you know how she is good in sports? You have to see her, what he wrote, an article about Olympic competition where a Jewish girl won a medal. And Ilana shows, you cannot describe everything. She is so bright, unbelievable.
You have a fan, a big fan, Ilana.
Yes.
It's mutual. He's a wealth of knowledge. Is really, when I visited and he showed me all the pictures and all of our family history, it's really, history needs to be collected. Family stories need to be collected and written down. It really is important and essential to I think.
Ilana, each time when I hear you, I learn something new about you.
We're so happy that you could be on today, Boris. Thank you for your message to us. And can we have a hello from Ina and David?
You have to unmute. Yeah, you have to unmute, Abba.
There we go.
Okay. Okay.
Good.
First of all, I will want to say thank you for this meeting. We are so excited to see you, Josie.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. And we, all this year, we feel we were so grateful for help of your community, of Schenectady community, and all that difficult period that we were refusing. We felt we were connect with you, and we felt that we have a friends, and you were in touch with us. It was so important for us, and we are really appreciate your help. And
It's wonderful to hear you say that. Toda rabah.
it was very, very important for us.
Yeah.
We are so grateful for your support. And it was not only feelings, it was so, it gave us strength to continue our struggle, you know. It's very, very important for us.
Well, thank goodness it had a happy ending. We were so pleased to be a part of that. It really is going on the end of our hour together, but I do want to, of course, thank Ilana for sharing your family story with us. And I thank all of you who are on today who were not a part of that period, and maybe even some younger people are on today that didn't know about the Refuseniks movement. We thank you all for your interest in this subject, and for some of you who are on today who actually worked on the committee back in the 80s to free Soviet Jewry, and in particular to help the Kvartin family. We do have an opportunity as we close the formal program to stay on with some of you and interact a little bit more with David and Naina, Ilana and Boris. And I think some of you know who you are. We'd love to have you stay on for a few minutes. But in closing, of course, thank again the Federation of Northeastern New York and Rob Kovach and the staff in particular. It was a wonderful program. I'm so glad it was recorded, and so that more of you, in fact, a lot of people who registered evidently could not get on this morning. So this morning here, evening in Israel. So you will be able to see the recording shortly, either on Facebook or you'll have a link to get onto it. Ilana, this has been an incredible incredible time to get acquainted with you as an adult. So extraordinary in your professional life and in your family life. And we thank everybody for being on this morning. Sarah, however you work the operations, we will close by wishing everybody well. Those here in the Northeast, stay well. We appreciate some of the other Federation people who are on all over the country, and Capital District community people on from Florida and from California and from Texas, wherever they are at the present time.
Jerusalem.
And Jerusalem, of course, yes. I think Boris's granddaughter was supposed to be on from Jerusalem. I'm not sure if she is.
I'm here.
Maggie. Oh, good, Maggie. All right. Well, some of us will stay on to continue a more personal conversation, those who had been involved in the committee. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much. This is really moving and exciting for me.
Thank you very much.